dear all, dear participants, it is my pleasure to welcome you in the dialogue titled The War in Ukraine and Europe's Energy Dilemmas. I don't think that there will be any other session with such a hot topic. All of us know what we are going to discuss, and it depends on us to see what can be our contribution in this dialogue. Professor Pantelis Kapros, an outstanding international and pan-European expert, will initiate the dialogue with keynote introductory interventions for, let's say, no more than 15 minutes, and conclude the session with some final remarks for, let's say, 5 minutes, because I keep in my mind that we have 1 hour for this dialogue. 4 high-level distinguished panelists, Mr. Slatko Neikov, Chairman of the Board of Directors in the Energy Management Institute in Bulgaria and Distinguished Fellow of ENA, Dr. Charles Elinas, Senior Fellow in the Global Energy Center of the Atlantic Council and Visitor Research Fellow of ENA, Professor Ionuț Purica from the Romanian Academy WEC National Member Committee and Distinguished Fellow of ENA, and Dr. Leo Drolas, Independent Energy Consultant from UK and Distinguished Fellow of ENA, will comment and enrich the dialogue with their experience and knowledge in a 2-round procedure consisting of 6 and 3 minutes duration per panelist, in order to have the time to provide them the time to comment what they will listen and what they will receive from you. During the first round, and considering the time restrictions, I may receive some questions and statements from you, and those statements and the questions will be inserted in the second round dialogue. Finally, a silent signal will be raised 30 seconds before the end of each intervention, politely requesting the conclusion of its intervention. Now, and before I will invite Professor Pantelis Kapros to take the floor, allow me to remind you a part of the ancient dialogue between Athenians and Melians mentioned by Thucydides that may fit well to the war in Ukraine. Επισταμένους προς ειδώτας, ότι δίκαια μεν εν το ανθρωπείο λόγο από της ίσης ανάγκης κρίνεται. Δυνατά δε υπρούχοντες πράσωση και ασθενείς ξυγχωρούσι, which means, knowing that in human relations, legal arguments have value when those who invoke them are roughly tied in strength, and that, on the contrary, the powerful imposes what his power allows him to do, and the weak give in as long as his weakness imposes it on him. If we have Professor Kapros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I fully agree. It is a very important moment in the energy policy, energy economy of Europe and probably further abroad. And I would like, in my short presentation, to initiate this dialogue, to present a few key ideas of the REPowerEU plan. You know, REPowerEU is a piece of great importance of the European Union and is considered as the response to the crisis, not only the Ukraine war, but in more general, the price crisis, the natural gas price crisis that we are experiencing almost 1 year now. Europe has decided already the Green Deal the national energy and climate plans, the Fit for 55, which is an enhancement of the Green Deal. And just before starting discussing the details of the Fit for 55, we have the crisis, and the response is this REPowerEU. We are talking about this view of the European Commission and our modeling analysis that supports the European Commission, that the hike of gas prices experienced in 2021-2022 will continue for a while, probably the next winter, but there's going to be a reduction, gradual, not immediate. And if you see the right-hand slide, you will see that the new view of the European Commission, the REPowerEU, in the long term, speaks about gas prices to remain higher than any previous forecast has been accepted in the EU. So gas is expensive. The aim of the REPowerEU in the short term is to displace Russian gas from the European system. To do that, the main choice is, first of all, to reduce the overall natural gas consumption in all sectors, demand and power sector, with short-term measures. At the same time, diversify the gas supply routes, shift to LNG, enhance the LNG infrastructure and the pipeline infrastructure with very short-term constructions to allow the system to displace the Russian gas. At the same time, demand-side behavioral measures and energy efficiency investments such as the heat pumps. In the medium term, the REPowerEU accelerates the shift to the renewables and the energy efficiency. So it is as if the target of the Fit for 55, the Green Deal, that were already ambitious in 2035, for example, the REPowerEU sets them earlier, probably 2027, 2028, before 2030, so 5 to 10 years earlier. And this is the huge renovation of houses program, huge biomethane production and infrastructure with a mixture of biomethane in the gas distribution system. 35 BCM is the target. A huge additional photovoltaic system with obligation to develop the PV on the roofs. Additional investment in the power grid and storage to be able to manage and absorb the additional renewable. And a green hydrogen, also a very ambitious program of 40 megatons of hydrogen before 2030. So we're talking about a very big challenge of transformation that accelerates the green transition very considerably. Here is some of the primes model projections that we are doing, which have been reported in the official staff working paper that accompanies the REPowerEU. You may see on the left-hand side the primary energy, the mix, the fuel mix in the primary energy of Europe. And this column in the middle is the Fit for 55, the previous plan. And to the right, you see the adjustment, the REPowerEU. And obviously, in 2030, but also in 2025, a significant reduction, more than half of natural gas consumption in all sectors. and at the same time, an increase of renewables and decrease of the total energy efficiency. Same thing in the final energy consumption. The column in the middle, Fit for 55, on the right-hand side, Repower EU, you see a very significant reduction of gas, penetration of hydrogen in the mix, green hydrogen, significant increase of the renewables and biofuels, which is also here the case of biomethane. And if we see the 2030 targets, you see Repower EU more than doubling the development of green hydrogen in a short period of time. So this confirms that officially it's a major change in the plan of the EU. As an example, I show here the changes that are necessary to be done for the Greek National Energy and Climate Plan. And on the left-hand side, you may see a projection of the previous National Energy and Climate Plan for the power generation of Greece. Of course, there is a very significant increase of the renewables, mostly photovoltaic, but also some wind and the emergence of offshore wind, which is here in the blue. However, you see at the bottom that the previous plan was foreseeing, and PPC also, the stop of lignite in 2023 and the strong dependence on natural gas over many years in the future, up to 8 gigawatt of natural gas power plants. If you see the right-hand side, the revised National Energy and Climate Plan, which has not taken place yet, but it is a draft idea, of course, of how it should be adjusted to comply with the Repower EU. You may see that, of course, the renewables are maintained and accelerated. However, at the same time, there is a prolongation of the availability of the lignite plants until 2028, and the new lignite power plant should not be converted to natural gas as planned before, and all this make the natural gas capacity to be maintained at 6 gigawatts, and then what is the impact of this change? It is illustrated here, and you will see that there is a significant reduction of natural gas consumption in the power sector, and instead of the increase and the peak in the short term that was foreseen in the previous NECP, the revised Repower EU style projection is significant, are the gray columns here, significant lower. There is no increase, no peak, and this is maintained over the long term. I shift to another illustration to further show the importance of reducing natural gas consumption in the short term in Europe in order to be able to diversify the origin of gas and displace Russian gas in the short term. Here you see natural gas consumption in European Union 27 member states in BCM historically, and then the projection in the Fit for 55, the blue line. Of course, natural gas being a fossil fuel is in a stepwise manner reduced in the main Green Deal scenario to reach climate neutrality by 2050. But in addition to that, to displace Russian gas, we show that it's necessary to steeply decrease natural gas, you see here, in 2025, to have almost 50% reduction of the foreseen natural gas consumption in the previous plan, to continue this reduction in the future and follow the gray line, which is of course significantly below the previous plan of the blue line. And how it looks like the mix of gas origins in the REPowerEU based on the Prime's natural gas model projections with displacement, full displacement of Russian gas. You see, Russian gas in 2025 is zero, and the same zero, nothing. The gray area is Russia, very significant decrease, 2022, 2023, half, 2024, another half, and then zero, and zero, of course, in 2030. It is possible by increasing modestly, I would say, the provision of LNG in Europe. Why this is possible? It is because the total demand for gas decreases significantly in the REPowerEU projection. And the modeling here shows that if it was the Fit for 55, then it would be extremely difficult. It would be the limit of possibilities to replace Russian gas by LNG. And that would be unsustainable, unfeasible in reality. So the essence of the REPowerEU is to reduce natural gas demand and reinforce the capacities. Here is a projection of new pipelines and new LNG terminals in the period 2023-2025, and then in the next 5 years in Europe to displace Russian gas and make the new system robust, and of course absorb and use further the additional LNG. You see here two important investments. This part, Eastern Europe, and here Eastern Europe and Central Europe also for new LNG terminals, Germany, Poland, are very significant investments that are necessary. The Eastern Europe is about adjustments, the reverse flow pipelines, connections that are missing, and here new LNG terminals. And the second area of investment is Southeast Europe with new LNG terminals, mostly FSRUs, to allow flowing gas from the south to the north. And also in the second half of the decade, additional pipelines to be able to bring gas from Israel, Egypt, and the eastern part of the Mediterranean. And the total additional investment is quite feasible in terms of amount of money, and it is much lower, if you can see here, of what would have been necessary to do if Europe was following the previous plan of Fit for 55. The REPowerEU reduces also the needs for investment and generally reduces the cost of adaptation. The conclusions we get out of the modeling with primes for the European Commission for the REPowerEU and the natural gas system is that it is feasible to get rid of Russian gas very quickly. The significant shift to LNG is possible. However, reducing demand for natural gas is of critical importance to displace Russian gas effectively and an affordable cost. And without the gas demand reduction in sensitivity analysis, we show that gas supply to Europe reaches the limits of possibility, and it is threatened by possible curtailments and difficulties in the supply if total natural gas consumption is not reduced. Provided that there is this reduction of natural gas, then the global LNG supply capacities, which are under expansion, can cover without problem the small additional amounts of LNG that are needed to replace Russian gas. Of course, within the internal markets of gas and electricity, these changes imply significant changes in the gas flows and the commercial transactions. And with this final remark, I stop here my presentation. Thank you, Chairman and participants.
Thank you, Professor Kapos. And I hope that you will remain with us. You have made
Yes,
an excellent
absolutely.
presentation. You have offered all the information we need to proceed for the dialogue. And I think that now it is time to discuss concerning the title of the session. We have all the information, but now we have to think about what are the dilemmas and what is the opinion of our panelists concerning those dilemmas. A dilemma, according to my opinion, is a state where we have multiple choices, and according to our wisdom and experience, we propose to take one decision. And we are going to have a decision in relation to the war in Ukraine, because this is the title of the session. So I will ask and invite our panelists to take advantage of Pantelis Kapros' presentation and have their opinion. And please, I kindly ask you to prepare your contribution. Don't remain as silent participants. Express your opinion when the first round of our dialogue will finish. So, Mr. Nevskov, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. You advised us in advance that we should focus mostly on the presentation of the intervention by Professor Kapros as a background. And on this ground, I just want to make three comments for contributing to the debate. Firstly, I noted that although the title is linked to Ukraine, in the context of Ukraine, and the focus was on the Repower EU plan, which is linked to that. In fact, in the presentation, the key focus was gas. But let me recall that in this context, the Repower EU is not only about gas. There's also concrete references to nuclear. There are also concrete references to energy efficiency. There are also concrete references to coal. And on this ground, my first message is that we are again facing a situation which is very good for energy analysts, and it is that forecasts never come true in the energy sector. My second message is linked to the fact that the war of Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine, which I shall not also jump to the political part of it, but it is linked to our debate, but it is not the start of the topics which are raised, because the issues related to diversification, to the role of energy efficiency, to the role of coal, to the Green Deal, which was also referred to, are prior to the war. And from this point of view, in fact, we should look at this war as one element which stimulates the developments, but it is not the start of these developments. And we hope that this war will be over very soon, but the issues will still be on the table after that as well. And I just want to make also reference to the previous speakers, to what was said by Mr. Stambolis and to our distinguished Turkish colleague about the role of energy storage. You in Greece have enormous experience, which we're following very actively in Bulgaria, related to the renewables and to prosumers and all that. So my second message from this point, from this perspective, is that yes, the war, as I said, is a kind of stimulus. The Repower EU plan of the EU is important, but we have to look well beyond the war is over. And from this point of view, my third message is that the EU support is very important and the EU planning is very important, but at the end of the day, we are back to a situation which is unfortunately very vivid in the energy sector. We share in the EU, and not only the EU, the same goals when it comes to the energy policy, but we suffer very individually. We have a lot of individual problems. And this is why the role of the national governments in this process will be of outstanding importance. I will give you an example with my country. There is now a huge debate about the role of coal. Bulgaria maybe is the most dependent on coal in the EU after Poland. It contributes something like 40% to the electricity production in the country. And to a certain extent, yes, there is an overall trend towards abolishing coal, but this is not so easy, and it has enormous social implications, which, by the way, are also referred to in the Repower EU planning, although not in very concrete terms. Just to mention in this context that there is an upcoming very strong debate on what is called Social Fund for Climate, which is an EU initiative launched last year. So this is my last message. Yes, we follow the EU rules, but there are a lot of national, individual problems in each country, and the support of the EU along the general policy guidelines is very, very important. But in the next years, and particularly when it comes to planning, the role of the national governments will be of enormous importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that you have broadened our discussion.
Yeah.
But, well, let me keep something to say that talking about war, we are talking about policy, because according to Clausewitz, war is part of policy making. And so our session is invited to deal with policies and energy and dilemma.
Yeah.
So thank you, and I do expect from the audience to participate, but after we finish with the first round. So now it is time for Dr. Elinas to take the floor and raise questions, and most important, to have his opinion on how to do with the emerging dilemmas.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to come from a different angle. In my view, getting rid of gas is going to be very difficult. And the reason is because of renewables intermittency, which has not been solved yet, and it's going to remain. So the more renewables we use, the more gas we're going to need. And I will tell you where this is based. I mean, the Flame Conference in Amsterdam last month brought home some of these problems. Mr. Stamboulidis was there with me. I mean, it is fair to say that irrespective of how the war progresses, the measures being taken by Europe to wean itself from Russian energy are increasing Europe's energy dilemmas and challenges. And decoupling of European energy from Russian oil, gas, and coal it's going to be a one-go. It's going to be permanent, at least for the time being, for the foreseeable future. But in discussing Europe's dilemmas, we must remember that the energy crisis predated the Ukraine war. Recovery from COVID-19 and quantitative easing led to the global commodity boom. And I'm going to talk about more globally, not just Europe. Increasing energy demand and high prices we are experiencing now. The Ukraine war made this more difficult, but also brought home the enduring importance of fossil fuels, global energy security, and energy affordability. I mean, coming and agreeing that prices are going to remain high is one thing, and maybe some European countries can afford that, but can all of us afford it? Can the rest of the world afford it? High prices? The reality is that since 1970, until now, until this year, about 80% of global energy comes from fossil fuels, and I'm now talking global, not just Europe. What has been achieved during the last 10 years is to merely replace some coal by natural gas. The world has not yet had any serious transition to renewables to make a difference. Small advances, but nothing significant. There is no evidence that much has been done to squeeze out oil, gas, and coal. China is building many more coal-fired power plants than the US and the EU are closing. In India, coal provides 75% of its electricity, and it's not going away, it's increasing. In the light of the current energy crisis and high prices, especially high gas prices, the irony is that the big winner, even in Europe, is coal, not renewables, coal. It should have been the case for that renewables should have emerged as a winner, but it's not happening. This is the reality the world is confronting. Energy transition has not really started, but it needs to. We all agree we need to achieve that, but we're not doing it. The world has been mostly addressing reduction of energy production emissions, but has failed to address the erosion of the natural carbon sequestration. And I was amazed to find out that last year, the Amazon became a net emitter. Our carbon sink has become an emitter. The net result of these mechanisms is that the carbon concentration in the atmosphere that causes global warming has been growing up steadily by 2 parts per million every single year, including last year, including now, as if nothing has been done with transiting from fossil fuels to renewables. With the world coming out of the pandemic, economic recovery set in motion a commodity price boom, and oil and gas energy prices increased sharply. That was the logical consequence of what happened during the pandemic and before. Quantitative easing, printing money, running serious negative interest rates, all had over a long time, meant that too much money ended up chasing too few goods, driving prices and inflation up. What the Ukraine war brought home is that fossil fuels are still existential to global energy systems, and that global energy security and geopolitics matter. The world needs to pursue development of renewables going forward. But low energy density and intermittent renewables need backup. That means that with the increasing adoption of renewables, gas is becoming even more important than before, including LNG. The sources of LNG are quite limited, with diversification of supplies becoming incredibly important. Falling back into coal is not a choice the world that should be making. As the world pushes for more renewables, the requirement for gas as backup increases. But the intermittency of renewables is making gas intermittent, making the operation of gas power facilities that much more expensive than otherwise would have been. As long as intermittency remains an issue, the world needs a transition strategy for gas, not just renewables. High prices should incentivize more investments in new gas and energy resources, but it is not. For this to happen, the US and the EU must stop scapegoating gas and give clear signals that gas will be needed well into the future, not just until 2030. Talking about new gas pipelines is one thing. But who is going to invest if the EU says we don't need that much gas after 2030? Not doing so will lead to another crisis in a few years down the line, as oil and gas supply shortages become more acute. Gas is a necessary part of the solution, but the gas industry must also get serious about addressing methane emissions and about adopting CCS at large scale. The world needs to get more serious about energy security and energy transition, but simultaneously, not just looking at the net zero element, including also natural carbon sequestration. If this is not recognized and addressed, the world will carry on adding 2 parts per million to the global carbon concentration every year, inducing global warming. As soon as there is a crisis, people are reminded of the reliance on fossil fuels and that the energy security and consumer affordability matters. If consumers cannot pay the high prices, it becomes a political imperative. Politicians scramble to bring energy prices down by cutting taxes and also by Biden traveling all the way to Saudi to convince the Saudis to produce more oil to bring the oil price down. The world and governments will need to think about how people pay for energy. It is a basic living requirement that all people are entitled to, and it has to be affordable at low prices. And I will talk about what all this means for the EU and what should be done in my second part, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. And before I leave, I ask Professor Purica to take the floor. Allow me to say that when we are talking, according to my opinion, that I'm not sure that it is correct, but when we are talking about the war in Ukraine, we are not talking only about what is happening in this part of the continent. I have to remind you that there is also an existing dilemma, although we have made a decision. What about the Nord Stream 2? Is it a wise decision to close this? We have the Barents Sea and the huge natural gas reserves. Is it wise for the European economy to close this road of economic development? And we focus on electricity and then natural gas. But what about oil? I mean, do we think that we face a dilemma concerning the supply of oil production from the Russian Federation? And is our decision to have an impact on the European economy competitiveness? I think that those are questions, and we have prominent panelists, and indeed it's very important to have your opinions. So as we are approaching, please mind to think that oil is also important, and natural gas in Europe does not arrive only from Ukraine and Turkish Stream, but also from the Nord Stream. And is it wise? Some they say yes, and they say no, to choose something different. So let's have your opinion, and then we may continue.
Thank you a lot. First, allow me to thank President Kostis Samboulis and the staff of IENE for keeping the barricade in all sorts of weathers and situations. And looking at the war in Ukraine and the energy dilemmas, it occurs to me that I should express the war in Ukraine in energy terms. In the last 3 months and something, Russian Federation has diversified its exports of energy to Ukraine beyond gas into chemical energy with very short time constant of conversion to thermal energy, usually called explosion. It's a lot of that energy that they exported to Ukraine in the last 115 days. One thing that it occurs now is that when we talk energy dilemmas, let me, as a former member of study group of World Energy Council scenarios 2060, 2050, let me express in terms of in the language of World Energy Council as energy trilemma. It's an index that they are implementing, containing energy security, security of supply, environmental impact, and affordability. And it's a question of intercorrelation in between these three domains that is actually happening right now, triggered mostly by the war in Ukraine. First, let me talk about environment, climate change, and the reduction of emissions. Regardless of you call it Green Deal, you call it Fit for 55, there's been an evolution of these concepts in the strategy of the European Commission. I was a member of the advisory group of energy of the European Commission, participating in actually three strategies. One of them was emissions, another one was energy security, launched in 2014 actually, and another one is innovation in energy. So
Take your time. Take your time to fix it.
sure, this is Murphy's law. Whenever you want to say something important, electronics is reacting. So the idea is that we are now in a position to secure reduction of emission, for example, with innovations, with technologies. In my opinion, the logic that we promoted up till 115 days ago, let's renounce coal, let's shut down coal, is somehow flawed. We shut down coal based on the logic that it is pollutant. Then on the same logic, let's shut down transportation, because that is the highest source of pollution, of local pollution. We are not how an economy would work without transportation. I mean, the logic has got something flawed. We are not shutting down transport. We are replacing pollutant transport technologies with non-pollutant one. I mean, electric vehicles, for example, that are replacing normal thermal motors vehicles. And on that, I tried to make a small calculation on how much more power generations we will need to cover up electric vehicles. And whoever wants to know results, we can discuss them after that. We don't have that time now. Second, we don't abandon coal. We abandon polluting coal technologies and replace them with clean coal technologies. Carbon capture, storage, and use, coal gasification, all sorts of technologies available nowadays, now, immediately. On the same thing, on the consumption side, I remember, just let me give you this example. I was a project officer in the World Bank, and I salute Professor Kapros because their adaptation of primes in 2014 for Romania, I was one of the project officer in the bank that was involved in doing these things. I was in Albania. A colleague was putting together a big public lighting project for Albania, efficient light bulbs, switchers, dark light, and so on, $100 million. It occurred to me, and I told him, at the time, slightly joking, but then what I'm telling you is one thing that I will stress later, is, hey, why do we need public lighting? Because we don't see in the dark. There are 2 million Albanians. At $50 a piece, we can buy them infrared goggles. They will see in the dark. It's still $100 million investment. So they will not need public lighting. They will not need lighting in the buildings. There will be a tremendous economy of energy and emissions. But it's a question of values of life. Will you accept to be given an infrared goggle and then shut down all the lights? I mean, it's public opinion, values of living that we have to factor in into our technologies and our visions for development. Finally, we arrive at affordability. What is happening nowadays in the power markets, normally a market is an interplay between the benefits of competition and the cost of market complexity, as I call them. I have some books and papers on that. Whoever is interested, we can discuss. But the whole thing is, nowadays, the companies, the participants in the power market, are no longer looking for competition. I haven't seen a company reducing their prices very much to attract all the clients of the other companies and increase their income based on quantity, on selling, not on price. Everybody is now raising the prices. This is a cluster that acts as a monopoly, not as a competition market. Probably in every stock exchange, when the prices are going berserk, if I can use the term, the activity is suspended and they wait for the whole thing to calm down. You can't suspend selling energy, but you can regulate it for not forever, but for a moment, for a period of time, until the whole thing is repositioned and the markets are starting again to use competition in order to really bring benefits to the economy. Finally, if the gas prices are increasing, then you are affecting the production of food, which is another form of energy. A normal person needs to have about 2,700 kilocalories of food per day. So, looking in terms of energy, we need to have an integrated, and this is the last idea, an integrated view on how we want to make systems and evolution and where we want to go. Obviously, there are extreme scenarios, okay? I mean, some people are talking about using, I don't know which type of nuclear missiles, and those, as an extreme scenario, will create peace in the world, 1,000 years at least peace, rather radioactive, that will solve two problems. No more pandemics because there will be nobody to get infected, and
no more population expansion.
no more increase in temperature because we will have a nuclear winter that will eliminate the problem. Do we want this type of scenarios? I mean, I'd rather go against that logic and keep our cooperation. Actually, the World Energy Council is now analyzing not only the usual scenarios of government goes ahead, markets follow, and see Energiewende in Germany or China, or market goes ahead with innovation and government supports like United States and others. But a third type of scenario where the fluxes are in this, how should I say, interrupted in the world, and there are various areas that start acting on themselves, developing like that. My feeling is that we are living a critical moment in terms of what is happening, and the decisions that we take now are going to be very somehow with a high impact on mid and long-term development. So these are the basic ideas that I tried to convey to you. And thank you again for the opportunity to say all this.
Thank you, Professor Korikas. And I think that they have raised two issues that also are important. You have raised the issue of affordability when we are talking about energy, which is very, very important, and it is part of the dilemma. We need energy, but not without taking into account the cost of the energy we need, and also the issue of competitiveness at international level. and I also expect that we are going to discuss in the second round. But I think that we have missing the dimension of oil, and we have a panelist that is an expert on this, and so I will ask Dr. Leodrolas to take the floor, and I do hope that his intervention may focus on this dimension. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank my old friend Kostis Stambolis for inviting me to be a panelist. We have been communicating and discussing these matters for decades, actually. And it's good to know that oil, with all the gas discussion, oil is still something that you need to address, the oil issue. And the most visible effect of the crisis on people in general in Europe and around the world is, of course, oil prices, and in particular, the price of gasoline, diesel for transportation, which affects most people on the planet somehow or another. And we must remember that this crisis is, of course, the Ukrainian crisis has affected gas for Europe in particular, because Europe imported 40% of its gas needs from Russia, but it also imported 26% or so of oil. And there are particular problems with oil from Russia in that Russia is a great exporter, or was until recently, of diesel, which is very much a key fuel. And it also is an exporter of what we call in our business vacuum gas oil, which is a kind of a raw material to produce some of the lighter products, some of the middle and lighter distillates. And the restrictions placed on Russia has increased the prices of diesel and, of course, vacuum gas oil behind it. So we have an increase in the Mediterranean, for example, where this discussion is taking place. The gasoline year on year since May 2021 till May 2022 has increased by 90%. I'm talking about the wholesale price of gasoline, not the retail price. Diesel has gone up in the Mediterranean region by 100%. Fuel oil, by contrast, heavy fuel oil has gone up by only 61%. Jet fuel, because people are traveling a lot more now, and of course the summer season is upon us, has gone up by 120% in 1 year. So oil has affected quite severely a lot of the products we depend on for transportation. And of course, we're in the summer season, so heating oil in Greece will become very important when the winter starts to bite. So that's another area to expect price increases, severe ones. The electricity price, the latest one I have, the latest information, electricity prices in Greece went up by 80% year on year. Whereas the price of gas, the TTF, Tidal Transfer Facility benchmark for Greek gas prices, went up by 173%. So you can see that the public has become very much aware of the key role played by energy. And what worries me is that the EU, in its response to the Russian gas and, of course, oil problem, has been taking decisions to quite severe decisions in the short term and later on to decrease gas use in a knee-jerk reaction, and to replace it eventually with more renewables. Now, the problem, Dr. Elinas has alluded to that, which is an important issue, that the intermittency of wind power is something that if you increase and wind power is the main renewable that we're talking about and has been invested in, to increase renewables ever more creates this problem that what happens when the wind doesn't blow? You might say, well, what do you mean what happens? We'll have enough capacity around. Yes, but capacity is one thing. Utilization of that capacity is another. I don't know if you're aware, or most people are aware, that the utilization rate in Greece of its wind power for the year 2020, which is the last year we have of statistics from the BP Statistical Review, was 28%. Now, can you imagine 28% of the time, the capacity, the wind power capacity, was able to actually deliver electricity? That's at the point of creation of that electricity, but then you have the transmission losses, you have other losses. So eventually what you get out of wind power is a lot less than the capacity figures indicate. And when investments come in, they talk about an investment of so many billions of euros in wind power. They say it will electrify and help provide electric power for 2 million homes or 3 million homes. This is all theoretical. Mankind, just to remind ourselves, left wind power a long time ago as a source of energy for critical activities. For example, sailing and moving products around on the seas. So we have to be careful here because things change. For example, President Putin, for all his godlike activities, he's not going to be there forever. The situations change. We know this in the oil business. So we don't know how things will evolve in the next 10 years or 5 years, even 6 months. The war will end at some stage. The discussions will change. So we can't set in stone and go for these very expensive investments without pondering what might happen. Let me give you a very small example from the oil side, which shows how things can change. At the moment, we have a perfect storm, really, of attempts to reduce dependence on Russian oil. At the same time, we have problems in Libya with production. We have, in the next 5 or 6 weeks, we have maintenance coming in a big Kazakhstan field. We have the ongoing sanctions on Iran. We have the Venezuelan sanctions. And one of the medium-term problems is that the shale oil industry in the United States, in spite of the investment of very high prices, well over $110 in the United States for WTI, the shale oil industry is not investing as much as it should be. With that huge gap between the $110 and the cost of production around $40. Why aren't they going hell for leather to invest more? They are not, because having invested so much in shale, their shareholders, who haven't seen many dividends over the previous years, are saying enough is enough. They're not saying it just this year. They were saying it 2 years ago. Enough is enough. We really need to see some return on our investment. So they're not actually doing as much as they should be doing, given this huge price incentive. So there are quite a few lessons there. We are caught in this trap, both on the gas side and on oil, because of decisions taken some time ago, and also because the reactions are not there from the supply side. The politicization of oil is ongoing. It has been going on since the 1970s with OPEC, and this is continuing. And now you could call the sanctions on Russia, on the oil side anyway, you can call it as a continuation of this politicization of oil. I'm not advocating not doing anything about this, the invasion of the Ukraine. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we have to think carefully before we lash out on new policies. And I share Professor Kapros's feelings about the situation. But modeling, I'm a modeler, I have been for the last 45 years. Modeling is one thing, practicalities is a different matter completely. So these are just a few thoughts, and I might have some time later on to maybe expound on some of these thoughts. But thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Drolas. I think that we have an understanding, and we have received opinions for not only for electricity, but also for natural gas and for oil and renewables. And not only about short-time perspectives, but also about long-term perspectives. And I think that now it is a time to see if and what you react. So please, I will remain silent until I see one gentleman or one lady to raise a hand and make his or her contribution. So please, the floor is yours. We have a dialogue. So, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a new idea? Do you think that we have to think short time, or we have to think about what will happen in Europe after 20 or 50 years? What will be the direction we'll take concerning energy in Europe? Yes, please.
There is a magical word, it is deliver.
Your name, please, for the...
Yes, my name is Christos Kolovos, and I'm a former director for the mining sector in northern Greece, Public Power Corporation of Greece, lignite mining in Western Macedonia. There is a magical word, and this is deliver. Do we think that the energy policy delivers? I think I have an understanding from what I hear that our common understanding is that the policy is not delivering. The renewable policy does not deliver. So, what is the outcome of this policy, the renewable craziness? The outcome is that Germany has already installed 140 gigawatts of renewables, and this quantity of renewables is not able to produce enough electricity during the dark doldrums, as they call them, even to give electricity to Greece or to Denmark, which have a small load consumption. So the problem is exactly the intermittency.
Okay.
The problem is that the only renewable that can provide base load to the electricity network is the biomass. But biomass means that we have to lock down the forests, which is not sustainable. So the problem is that we have added a lot of wind and a lot of solar to our electricity networks.
Okay, you are
This
quite
means,
clear.
yes.
Please conclude, because I intend to take one or two more interventions.
Yes.
Please.
So, do you think that we should stop adding renewables to the electricity network and instead target the renewables to hydrogen production?
Okay, yeah, I
and
think
relieve
your
the
opinion
electricity
is clear.
network.
So please
Yes.
conclude, and may I ask from the participants who else wants to interfere? Is anybody? Yeah, yes? Oh, yes, please.
It's the panelist that asks.
Oh, yes.
Leo does.
Dr. Drolas.
Yes, I would like to respond to that observation and question. It's obvious why this is not the case, that 140 German gigawatts of wind power cannot deliver because of what we said earlier, the intermittency problem and the capacity utilization. I think of Germany, I'm doing it from memory now, it's around 32% capacity utilization. In Greece, it was under 30%. The US has 35% capacity utilization. So that's the key issue. You can build as many wind turbines as you like, but you're always going to get around 30%. That's the nature of the beast. So you can't avoid that. The answer would probably be and must be at some stage nuclear power for a country like Greece. And of course, these Stambolis will remember 20 years ago, I was advocating at a special conference on that subject that Greece should go for nuclear power 20 years ago. And I was told at the time, it's not popular. This is where governments come in and should be guiding people with the correct information. Greece has so many uninhabited islands. It's ideally suited to nuclear power for cooling. It's a no-brainer, but it hasn't happened because of all these sort of arguments, which are really quite, as they say in Greek, periplanitika. They're not really arguments that are precise. So these are just a few quick answers to the question that was raised.
Thank you.
Can I also
May I
join
make a short
commenting?
comment on
No,
that?
no, because let
also-
me see if we have any intervention because we have consumed the time. So
Okay, just a phrase.
you will take it for sure. But is anybody from the audience?
Yes, if I may, I am for the external audience online, this Professor Konoplyanny. Can I also shortly respond to this question that was raised from the
Who's
audience?
speaking?
I will try to
You need
be
a
short,
microphone because otherwise.
if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. So the proposal to use renewables to produce hydrogen, which means green hydrogen, that was a perception in the fundament of the European Union, a Green Deal and a hydrogen policy. But I have also some concerns in speaking about utilization rates. In 2019, according to my knowledge, in Germany, utilization rate of electricity beyond the load curve, that means when it can be sold free of charge or at the negative price, was only 211 hours within 8,760 annual hour counting. Yes, so only 2.5% utilization rate. That, from my point of view, creates no economics. But the green hydrogen has in its cost approximately 70% is the cost of purchased electricity. So that's from economic term is not a very good idea. I'm not speaking about also very low energy efficiency, because Professor Drolas has already mentioned that you will lose a lot of energy in the transmission from renewable electricity to electricity, then from electricity to renewable hydrogen. And then when you would like to use this hydrogen again to produce electricity. So from energy balance point of view, that will be, I will say, very counterproductive. So I'm skeptical. Thank you so much.
Chairman,
Thank you. I have the feeling that
I think it would be not correct to stop the session without an answer to these things.
yes, but well, I'm pressed from the time margins, and I will ask kindly
Just
the
a
panelists to
short,
conclude very short, and because we have to offer to Professor Kapros a time slot to conclude.
Absolutely. Let me put it in a more exotic way. They say that every kick in the back is a step forward. The war in Ukraine is a very strong kick in the back, and let's see what steps forward will follow, because they are supposed to change a lot of things. That was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
We have 1 or 2 minutes
Yeah, one
intervention.
sentence from my side too.
You don't.
No, I have one sentence.
Okay, please.
Right. I think that what unites us, all speakers, is a much more realistic view of the situation. And from this point of view, I think that evidently there is a necessity of reconsideration of how Brussels, how the EU does its energy policy. Because there were very prominent examples about oil, but we can stipulate on that also in the other sectors. Some steps are done too quickly, without enough justification. And from this perspective, the EU is very important and Brussels is very important, but I want to repeat, the national government's role will increase. And the war in Ukraine is not the start. It just stimulated this debate, but we have to consider it more at a national level and influence Brussels rather than vice versa.
Thank you.
Correct.
Is that going to be the end of it? Or
No. If you have a comment, because the conclusion will be made by Professor Kapos.
Are we going to be able to use our 3 minutes, or is that the end of it?
2 minutes. No, not 3. 2 minutes, because we don't have time.
Okay, I mean, I have quite a few points to make, but I think we're running out of time, so I'll limit it. First of all, I think one part of the problem is that we have a European Commission which is unelected. It's an appointed commission, and it doesn't respond to people's problems. It merely responds to activists and those who put pressure in Brussels. So since the crisis, the European Commission has gone into an overdrive, issuing new policies and regulations on everything related to climate change and energy, left, right, and center. This can lead us in the wrong direction long term, and I think it is already leading us in the wrong direction. One should not make long-term energy policies in the middle of a crisis. That is critical, and that's what is happening now, and we're going in the wrong direction. I mean, only on the 8th of June, Ursula von der Leyen admitted that the EU's electricity market does not work anymore and needs to be adapted to the new realities of dominant renewables. I mean, it's a stark recognition coming from the EU that has driven us into a situation where electricity prices are so high, and then she comes and says, well, I don't think it works anymore. Well, I think that's nonsense. And also, only on the 7th of June, the MEPs, the members of the European Parliament, threw out parts of Europe's climate bill. Basically, it's an indication that, and a warning, and of the challenges the European Commission will be facing as it pursues an agenda seen to be at odds with people's concerns. We are having the French elections next Sunday, concluding the parliamentary elections, and I hope that we are going to get a kick in the back out of that to move us in a different direction, because we are driving the world in 3 parts. In Europe and the United States on one side, Russia and China on the other, and the rest in the middle. With energy in Europe and the United States being very high, but a lot less cheaper in China and Russia. And guess where the rest of the world is going to go shopping? So what do? We introduce border taxes to stop their goods coming in? It's not going to work. Climate change, we're talking about global warming all the time. Climate change does not depend on Europe and the United States. That's where not the future growth is going to be. The vast growth is going to be in India, in China, in Brazil, in Indonesia, in
South
Nigeria,
Africa, wherever.
and all of these people need to come to the table. Eventually, China and Russia need to come to the table. At the moment, we are drawing lines. That isn't going to work. So how do we overcome that problem? And only this week, the MEPs also through other European laws, and if that is confirmed next week, it's going to throw Europe into turmoil. For example, they threw out the inclusion of gas and nuclear into the taxonomy. The European Parliament committees threw it out this week. If the Parliament next week confirms that and gas and nuclear are out of the taxonomy, that's going to be a huge move that is going to have a long-term impact on Europe, because funding of these projects is going to be forthcoming while the rest of the world is doing it. Where do we draw a balance? How do we move away from looking at some of the esoteric desires of people in Brussels into responding to what is actually happening in the rest of the world?
Dr. Drolas, if you want to make a short statement before I pass the floor to the Professor Kapros, please.
I don't want to keep Professor Kapros from his conclusions, but if I may say, the using modeling to achieve an objective is always dangerous. You can make any model do anything you want. I've been doing it for years, but it doesn't mean that out on the street people will respond in the right way. These are models, these are constructions. We have to be careful what we're doing, and Brussels has to pay more attention to what is needed at various times and not be lost in the long-term 2040, 2050. Who knows what will happen by 2040, 2050 in something as volatile as the oil market or the gas market or whatever. This is just my observation over many years, having been involved directly in and recorded and analyzed a lot of the major crises in energy since the 1960s, actually.
Well, Dr. Drolas, you have raised a philosophical issue concerning how people try to foresee future based on their experience. So, but this is another topic to be discussed. So, Professor Kapros, would you please be so kind to conclude this session?
Thank you, Chairman. The topic of the session was about the Ukraine war and the necessary adjustments of the European policy. And the people here, some of them, took the opportunity to, instead of addressing this topic, to attack again the issue of climate change policies and the renewables with false statements, with scientifically inaccurate statements. I am doing this, excuse me, Leo, I have to say my opinion, okay?
Yes, but can you please define what are these things we're saying?
I will tell you exactly where it is scientifically false what you are doing. So I am spending also many decades as a consultant, as an energy analyst. And I can tell you that I can bring here thousands of scientists supporting without any doubt that renewables deliver, that climate change is the major threat on the planet, and that this debate about whether doing something for the climate or not is over, is finished. And so it is out of the scope of this session. When you say that the wind power has a capacity factor of 28%, you say it demagogically, because you don't say that the 28% is a calculation. a calculation of electricity produced over the nominal capacity.
Yes.
But the wind power operates many more hours than the 28% of the time of the year, and produces, yes, less than the nominal capacity, but still produces. Almost 2/3 of the year, wind produces electricity. And it is by far the cheapest way of making electricity. And there are not just models, but the most serious engineering calculations of the transmission system operators, of electricity companies, all of them having signed engineering studies to say that it is possible to have even 100% of renewables in the electricity system and have a very accurate and reliable system with full balancing and without natural gas. So thousands and thousands of people in the planet have confirmed this outcome. This debate is over. So probably we will have a possibility and time in another session to discuss the adjustment, but not whether climate change policy is what to do or not.
Thank you, Professor Kapros, because, well, you see, when I said about dialogue, I have the feeling that the dialogue has just started when we are finishing the session. But still, you can see that there is a broad area of dialogue, discussion, and presenting different approaches, because although we have received a lot of information, we avoided carefully to get involved in the dialogue. But at the end of the session, we have started discussing. So thank you very much for your participation. We apologize for the next session because we took the time, but still I hope that we have enjoyed the session. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, the panelists, for their participation. Thank you, the keynote speaker, for his participation. Thank you. So we have finished.
It's important to say that
there is something important. Okay.
None of us doubts climate change. None of us challenges climate change. You need to deal with it. It's not the question of climate change not being a problem. It's how do we achieve?
I have avoided because I have
Professor
devoted
Kapros
my last years on this issue. But this is not the time, as Professor Kapros, to resolve this issue now. Maybe in another session. Thank you very much. Thank you.